It's Earth Day at Rockaway Beach. Students and corporate volunteers have come together for a day of environmental charity work with the Rockaway Waterfront Alliance, a nonprofit that does environmental projects with young New Yorkers. Some are planting small trees on the shoreline, while others help pick up the mounds of plastic trash trapped in the sand and marshes less than 200 yards away from the Atlantic Ocean. Rockaway Beach's shoreline is one of many around New York that has been collecting 8.6 million New Yorkers' garbage for decades.
I wasn't really sure what happened to plastics. Like a lot of other people, I just assumed that once you threw it out, then it I really didn't think further. I didn't know what happened to it.
Andriana Lamandola is a Scholars Academy senior and third-year Rockaway Waterfront Alliance volunteer. Working with the nonprofit encouraged her to start her own research with professors from Brooklyn College on what happens to the plastic waste New Yorkers throw away.
I conducted a project called Microplastics Presence in Jamaica Bay's oysters and water columns. No one had tested previously the oysters in Jamaica Bay since microplastics are a relatively new topic. And there was only a few other studies about plastics in Jamaica Bay in general.
If and when New York City's plastic waste doesn't make it to the landfill, light from the sun begins to break them up into smaller and smaller pieces, a process called photodegradation. Once the pieces get to be less than 5 millimeters in size, they can then be classified as microplastics. Tons of tiny remains of water bottles, plastic bags, and straws find their way into New York's waters every day.
I found that the oysters in Jamaica Bay have been consuming them. In 2 oysters, there were over 130 fibers in different colors, and it was really shocking to see. I presented the project. I've spoken to other people at RWA about it, just kind of trying to get the information out. So here's what I know. This is what you want to do with it, just making people aware, because I feel like education is a huge aspect.
Presenting the possibilities of plastics. Plastics help save you from dents and broken bones. It helped protect my patella.
The Science History Institute dates the invention of the first synthetic plastic to 1907. But it didn't take the country by storm until after World War II, when plastic production increased in the United States by 300%. This increase continued into the second half of the 20th century. Plastic became commonplace in all aspects of life.
Tough. Pepsi-Cola's new 2-liter plastic bottle is 25% lighter than glass. It's tough and light.
Today, it's estimated by the EPA that the majority of marine debris, around 75%, is made of plastic.
Plastics make it possible.
Some organizations are attempting to fix this problem by educating students about plastic trash before it can become a microplastic.
So we're dealing with the problem with plastic straws, and today we have paper straws to see if they could be a substitute to fixing the plastic problem.
In 2016, Cafeteria Culture, a nonprofit that provides environmental education in New York schools, released this video, The Flaws of Straws, on their YouTube channel. Hosted by then 8th graders Destiny and Sharika, the piece aimed to teach about how plastic trash affects the environment and marine life.
We were interested in how students in East Flatbush could actually create their own videos and their own narratives around marine plastic pollution. There's street litter, which is a huge problem, and connecting it to not only to the waterways locally, but to a global marine plastics pollution issue.
Debbie Lee Cohen has been co-running Cafeteria Culture since its creation in 2009, back when it was named Styrofoam Out of Schools. The organization was initially founded to remove the over 850,000 styrofoam lunch trays used by New York schools every day. Today, they provide students with the information as well as the research, data collecting, and reporting skills to tell the story of plastic pollution in New York's waterways.
They've done everything from going to New York City Council and testifying, not just going to City Hall and saying, you know, we want this law to change or we want more laws, but actually bringing their own data, their own street litter data, to our City Council members and saying, this is what we learned in our neighborhood.
Researchers have known about the issue of whole plastic and microplastic waste in the oceans for decades. While nonprofits like Cafeteria Culture try to stop new waste, plastics still continue to enter waterways daily. Some researchers are now trying to understand how much of that waste settles in waters close in proximity to humans.
Plastic pollution affects everyone. You know, you don't have to like turtles, you don't have to like fish to care. I mean, this is impacting all of us.
Sandra Miola is an outreach director for New York, New Jersey Baykeeper, an organization focused on restoring and maintaining the health of New York and New Jersey's waters. In 2016, she and her colleagues collaborated with Rutgers University and a number of independent organizations to collect data on the amount of microplastic waste in New York Harbor.
And we use the numbers of plastics counted with the volume of water passing through our net and the distance traveled to obtain this figure. It's an estimation of the plastics, the total plastics in our entire region. So that number is 165 million. Enormous. You know, it should be zero. You know, and that's just the plastics that are floating. Half of the plastics we use every day do sink. So you can imagine, you know, it's not just the floatables. We have an enormous problem. They're living in the environment pretty much forever.
It doesn't stop there. When plastic degrades and combines with water, it acts like a sponge for whatever potentially toxic chemicals are present in the water that it sits in. As the sizes get smaller and smaller, microplastics are often mistaken by animals for food. These plastics often remain inside the stomachs and muscle tissue of birds, fish, oysters, and many other aquatic animals. And their systems can absorb the harmful chemicals the plastics may carry, potentially making their way up the food chain. But eating animals that have potentially eaten plastic isn't the only way that microplastics and their toxins could be entering human bodies, which is what Professor Beth Rabbit is researching with her students at the Department of Environmental Sciences at Rutgers University.
We're looking at fresh water because that's the water humans would have contact with. So if there is a problem with contamination or pollution in fresh waters, then that means it could be affecting our drinking water or the environment in general.
Within the last month, Beth and her colleagues have begun to analyze data looking into microplastics and the chemicals they may carry in the freshwater Raritan and Passaic rivers in New Jersey.
Our first data set came back about 2 weeks ago, and over 300 different organic compounds were found associated with the plastic and in the water column. If these particles are in the vicinity or part of fresh water that's being taken into a drinking water plant, then these particles are being taken into that plant, quite conceivably. I don't necessarily think the particles are coming out of your faucet. But if there are compounds associated with a particle that can move back and forth between the water and that piece of plastic, those compounds might not be removed as part of your water treatment process, especially if water treatment plants don't know to look for them or are not required to look for them.
Beth and her colleagues are still in the process of trying to understand and analyze their findings. Concrete evidence as to the dangers microplastics pose when in direct contact with humans is for the most part still unknown. But researchers remain concerned.
Everyone kind of underestimated the problem, and now in 2018 we're starting to realize the effects, and it's like, okay, well, now what?
It's not enough just to recycle. We tell people, you know, yeah, you reduce, reuse, recycle, but you have to refuse. You refuse plastic, and instead of using plastic, use something sustainable.